Jay, instantly, my mindset, and this is very similar to the public speaking stage as well, right? So, you know, they say public speaking is one of the second biggest fear after death, right? So my instant reaction when sort of facing these complicated or sometimes very vague asks on, let's go and deploy this technology, or go and execute this proof of concept, or, let's uplift this control a little bit, the cyber control a little bit more. My instant reaction has always been, yeah, let's have it. Come on, let's do this. I'm always there, like first one to put my hand up and be like, yes, I'll be that guy. I'm very much a yes man, and unfortunately that has worked against me as well, because sometimes I've said yes to too many things, and then you end up crashing and burning out. But usually, the instantly, Jay, to answer your question, is just putting my hand up and saying yes, and that's what's always sort of opened doors of opportunities. That's what's given me exposure to like the different types of projects that you can do within the cyberspace. So, it's not just about implementing new technologies, but there's also, demising legacy or old technologies. There's evergreening, upgrades, moonlighting, RFIs, and proof of concepts, like a whole host of different types of projects. And so that's given me a lot of exposure to that. But the key message is always been, it starts with your mindset. So I really like that question, Jay. And the mindset for me has always been just saying yes. And that's always opened doors. And that's not just, like extensions of contracts, but it's to meet other people on different teams and to learn about new technologies, and then to learn about how, what their processes are as well. So you get to move around different teams, learn different processes, and most importantly, connect with people and humans. That to me is crucial. Just by saying yes, the doors that it opens for you.
Secure CyberConnect will be working with DTX as it returns to Excel London for its 20th edition on the 1st and 2nd of October 2025. And this year, they're moving beyond digital for digital's sake and shifting focus to business-wide transformation, where people, process, and technology intersect. Explore every stage of transformation from high-level strategy to implementation on the ground. And with a packed program of expert speakers, innovative tech showcases, and peer-driven learning, from AI, cyber, data to digital, DTX is where innovative teams turn ideas into practical, measurable change. Register for your free badge at dtxevents.io.
Welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information cybersecurity, technology, and talent acquisition professionals. We share their journeys, unique perspectives, offer advice and guidance.
Our topics on this episode will be change is the only constant. Today we're delighted to be joined by Gurps Khaira. With 15 plus years of wrangling high stakes projects across cybersecurity, IT, banking, and even construction. Yes, he's built more than just spreadsheets. Gurps has mastered the art of managing chaos under tight deadlines and tighter budgets. Think of him as the Superman of organizational change, except with no cape and a lot more action plans. Gurps is your go-to guru for navigating the wild world of change, whether you're facing a digital transformation or just trying to keep your team on the same page. His tailor-made, action-packed training programs will help you conquer the chaos with confidence and a touch of flair. Gurps also works with international event and conference producers across APAC, Europe, MENA and USA to plan and deliver keynote speeches in an interactive, engaging and entertaining atmosphere for cybersecurity, digital transformation and change management events. Gurps, quite the intro. Welcome to Secure CyberConnect podcast and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you also, Warren, for having me. And thank you for that introduction. It was quite the speech. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And as we were saying just in setup, I want to thank you for all the hard work that you guys are doing over at Secure. So it's definitely recognised. So absolute well done to you both, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to be part of this.
I really appreciate that. Thanks, Gurps. And could you give the audience perhaps a high-level overview of some of the themes and topics that we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Warren. So I've called the talk today "Change is the Only Constant" because that is obviously a topic that's very close to my heart. I've spent the last 15 years or plus, in the change management industry, delivering projects and programs and portfolios in lots of different industries, which we'll go into a little bit more detail. But predominantly, it's been in the financial services, banking, and cybersecurity industry, and also like the fundamentals of change management that I'm going to focus on. I've applied them to the property and construction industry, as well as the fitness modeling and bodybuilding industry as well. So I'm happy to share, some of my lessons learned with your audiences, and it's just a privilege to be here, Warren and Jay. And I think the key thing to sort of focus on is like, it's all about the audience, the people out there listening. Like, I really hope that, you can sort of learn something from the lessons that I've learned, which has taken me, 15 or 17 odd years to put together and learn. And almost, it's that experience which has landed this podcast with you two lovely gentlemen today, right? So I'm hoping the audience can, have some golden nuggets that they can take away from the years of experience that I'm going to share with you today.
No, I'm confident they will. I've seen you speak, and obviously we've been really looking forward to the session. And before we dig into all of that, could you share with the audience something that you're proud of, excited about, that perhaps isn't featured on your LinkedIn?
Yes, actually, Warren, it's something that probably I'm going to bring more to the surface, actually, and that's my background in the fitness modeling industry. And so I'm a great believer of personal and self-development, and so I believe, you should always be growing and developing, even one tiny little bit on a daily basis. There was a great book I read many years ago called The 1% Solution, which is just about making tiny little increments, of progress every single day. And so that sort of mindset, I used to read these kind of personal development books back in the university days, and that sort of mindset laid the foundations of having a growth mindset and applying that mindset in almost every element of my life, like whether it's health, in the wealth and career section, or the health and fitness section, and also relationships and love section as well, with family and friends. So specifically, the one thing I want to share with you is more on the health and fitness side of things, where I took that growth mindset and just thought, I used to go to the gym quite a lot at the gym, and I just sort of kept pushing more and more and just wanted to know what the next level of fitness and training was. And so I just kept going, on my own for about I think it was about 7-8 years or so of just reading books on bodybuilding and fitness modeling and training, by myself without a trainer. And then just always like trying to become more and more of a, I guess, professional or more of an expert in that field. I just kept digging deeper and deeper until then I met a brilliant personal trainer who was a competing fitness model, and he sort of helped me take to the stage of fitness modeling. And so something I'm bringing more now to the surface is that journey of, starting with, I guess, low muscle mass and, not knowing much about fitness and training, and how that mindset has developed into physical, real world execution and actions, and then how that action and the execution of those actions has transformed my physique in order to get onto the stage and start competing. So after about 8 years of training, or 5 years of training by myself, 3 with a personal trainer, I then competed for about another 3 years in it's called the World Championships of Fitness Modeling Miami Pro. But I assure you, it's based in St Albans, and just north of London. So it's not as glamorous as the name may suggest. But I didn't know it at the time, but that journey, for over 8 years, would lay the foundations of my character in my career, and how transferable that mindset is to the world of cybersecurity, to the world of change management, and to the world of digital transformation. Like the parallels and the similarities are just insane. And so that's something that I'm very proud of having done that journey. And also, like, we'll dig deeper into like how those competencies have almost helped me get every single role within cybersecurity, within the banking industry, really. So I would love to share, more on that, and also I'm going to start, as I say, start pushing that a little bit more on LinkedIn and what those similarities are between a fitness modeling mindset and a cybersecurity work ethic.
No, it's a really unique perspective to share, and I think it's certainly going to resonate with many, and there are a lot of lessons that you can bring in from both the fitness and professional world. So, yeah, I do appreciate that, and we do commend you on the content that you actually put out there already, and you being open and honest. That's something that we talk to a lot of guests about. And with that in mind, could you perhaps share with us a significant challenge that you faced in your career that's shaped your views on cybersecurity, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. I think that the challenge I faced was, as a graduate, was not having the experience. Like, you're making applications, trying to get a job, and you just don't have that experience. Like, recruiters, consultancies, they all want to see, at the time, sort of, I graduated in 2008, in July 2008, and then I took a couple of months off for the summer. And then I actively started looking for roles in September 2008. Now, if anybody knows the significance of that date, it's when I crashed. So, there I was, all fresh out of university with, quite good grades. And, I was like, right, let's give this, banking industry a go. I started, making applications. And I think it was the Monday I started applying. And I think it was a Tuesday, if I remember, that Lehman's went down and crashed. And that's it, nobody was hiring. So the industry was against me. I didn't have any experience as well, apart from the degree I just walked out of Birmingham University with. So for me, the challenge was like, it was like trying to get in front of employers and consultancies and making sure that they could see, my CV. Because I already had the sort of mental confidence and mindset to be like, I can do any job. I've always had the mindset that if another human is doing it, it's possible, right? So, I just need that opportunity to get in front of the door. So I just needed the face time with the recruiters to allow to match up, with my sort of mindset and confidence of knowing that I can do the job. But the challenge was just getting in front of them, with no experience. So how, the thing to take away, like how I overcame that then was I had to sort of look into slightly different industries as well, not just banking, because banking, market risks are completely out of our control, right? So you have to acknowledge those and move with the trends and move with the changes in the industry. So I ended up looking in a couple of different industries as well, where my mechanical engineering degree, which I've just graduated from, where those skills could be transferred in slightly different industries. So I looked into the construction and property industry, and that was because I actually read a book by Robert Kiyosaki. I don't know if you've read it, Warren and Jay. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that really opened my eyes into, building wealth, building assets, and looking into the property world. So I actually ended up shifting to the property world for about a year and a half. And I've got a bit of a story if I can share with you on that.
Yeah, really, really love to hear that.
Yeah, so I guess sticking with the change is the only constant, right? Like, graduated from engineering, couldn't get a role in banking, which is where all of my friends were and where apparently all the money was in 2008. And then shifting into the property and construction world. So I finished Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and on the back, there was like, if you want to learn more about property, come and join our free 2-hour seminar. And so I went along to that free 2-hour seminar. And then it was this, brilliant, charismatic American public speaker who was telling you all the brilliant things of why you should get into the property market in the UK. And then after that 2-hour seminar, they were obviously upselling a 3-day conference in Heathrow Airport. And then I ended up purchasing that 3-day conference. And then they were, going a little bit more into detail about what the property market's like. And then obviously at that 3-day seminar, as you can imagine, there was more upselling as these courses and conferences go. So that was obviously a lot more expensive, and it was a 12-month mentorship program. Obviously, I won't name any names of companies, but then there they had all of these property tycoons and these very well-off people who had quite big property portfolios. And I just, following the principles of what I've learned in Robert Kiyosaki's book, I just went up to them and said, "Hey, look, I'm fresh graduate. I've got time, energy, and I'm hungry. Is anybody employing?" And then one of them, who was, had quite a lot of properties, he ended up saying, "Yes, actually, I need somebody on the ground, running around and just managing all my properties." And because he didn't have the time to go and sort of let tenants in, carry out viewings, do small maintenance jobs and all of that stuff. So that was all along the Thames Valley corridor, in Hertfordshire, Swindon, Reading, all of that. So I managed to do quite a lot of traveling there. So I ended up just basically shadowing this, multi-millionaire property tycoon in the residential property portfolio industry. And then that's where I kind of ended up learning the ropes of a completely, new industry that I had no exposure to, but just because I was just, hungry for it, like I just wanted to get out there, and I was willing to work for free at that time for a short period of time. And, crucially, it's about, applying the knowledge I just learned from this book, right? Like reading and obtaining knowledge only gets you so far, but it's the execution of that knowledge, which is where the real results come in, which help us implement all of these changes that we keep implementing in our organization. So ended up taking a bit of a pivot, and following this guy and just learning everything there was in the property industry until about a year or two later, when the market started picking up, and I ended up going back into the banking industry, and went into back office trade confirmations at Wells Fargo. Then I went into middle office at State Street, within the asset management, global advisors first, and then ended up for a very short period of time in their front office as a FX sales trader at SSGM, which is State Street Global Markets. So ended up getting exposure to back office, middle office, and front office as well. And my competencies that developed was just always improving processes. So I became very good at Microsoft Excel, VBA, and PowerPoint. So I was just always enhancing processes and always looking for that next improvement that I could make, either in the processes, either in the tech, and I dare say people and mind shift and cultures as well. So that's how I then ended up in change management and then running projects and bigger projects for the banking industry.
That's an incredible journey. I appreciate you sharing it. And I think what one key thing that stands out is you find yourself in a deep end. Of course, you've got experience in different areas of the business, and you've sort of brought that experience through because you've got sort of that worked experience in terms of the frustrations and the challenges that those individuals within organizations are facing. So it does put you in a great position. And briefly, could you share with us perhaps a mistake that you've made in your career and the lesson learned along the way?
Yeah, I had to think about that one, Warren. And the key thing is network for me. I think when looking back at trying to apply when Lehman's was crashing, fine, that's market risk outside of my control. But then when I did land a role back in banking 2 years later, I must have made well over 100, 200 applications, right? And in those days, there was no AI. There was, CVs had to be handwritten. You had to also send cover letters as well, and redraft them and make them unique to each company as well. So I was just, sending out so many applications, and then the one interview that I did end up landing was just because of who I knew and the contact there in the company at Wells Fargo. He simply, informed HR that a friend of his is applying, and he highly recommended me because he knew who I was. And then as a result of that got my foot through the door, and I ended up getting an interview. And that I just knew that that's all I needed was that interview. And then that interview turned into, I think it was another 3 or 4 rounds. And then I ended up getting the job, at Wells Fargo. And so that was just because of one person. And after that, I didn't really focus too much on building the network and building my people side of my professional network, because I was more focused, I guess at that time, just acquiring the knowledge of the actual banking industry and the role as well. So I had to become, a professional on what I was actually doing, within the back office as well, and confirming trades and pair offs and settlements and all of that good stuff. But I focus more on the actual sort of process and tech side rather than the people. And I think if there's one lesson that I would like to share is to start building your network, a lot sooner, or start now, right? If you haven't already done so. And with sort of LinkedIn is the one I would push massively. It's just there's so many platforms for you to engage and learn and build and grow that network, because you don't know when you're going to need that network. So build it when you don't need it. So that's what I would do, is don't just reach out to people and connect with people. Like if you're looking for a new job, let's say, build that network now when perhaps you're already in a role and you don't necessarily need it, because when you need something, people can almost smell the desperation from you, right? Like, so when you're a lot more relaxed, you have a different incentive as to why you're connecting. So for me, it would be focused on building a network, as well as your knowledge around processes and technologies within the role as well. So just trying to be a bit more of a balanced individual, really.
Absolutely. And looking at obviously the business transformation side and looking at delivering cybersecurity within that space, we know it's not, in any global situation, it's not just a technical function, it's a critical business enabler. And when you're dealing with multi-million pound programs, you're not just managing tasks, you're driving that transformation on a global scale. So it's not just about the tech, it's trust, it's regulation, it's resilience. Now, you've obviously been trusted to lead at this scale. So for listeners outside the enterprise world, how would you define your previous roles? What does it mean, really mean, to lead a multi-million pound cyber program?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. And so I've always seen it as a massive jigsaw puzzle, and you are the person, the change management professional, project manager, program manager, portfolio lead, whatever your title is. Like, your job is to bring that jigsaw puzzle together, and that jigsaw puzzle is scattered into many, many pieces, and those pieces are to do with people, processes, and the technologies. Right? We all know that. And so very often as a change management professional, like, your job is really to make sure that that jigsaw puzzle comes together, but also like how you go about bringing that jigsaw puzzle together. And so what I mean by that is, like, there are different avenues and work streams to manage when delivering change, right? So there are, the project plans and the milestones and all of that good stuff that goes with the planning element. Then there's all the tools and technologies that the teams are using. Then you've got the actual people element, so if you're managing teams as well. Then there's comms and communications, surrounding the change that the technology is going to bring. Then there's operating model changes, looking at the current operating model of the organization or the work function. And also the future state of that, of what that architecture will look like as well. Plus, all the internal governance, like such as GDPR and regulatory issues and any audit and compliance that you have to go through. So it's about knowing the internal processes of your organization and what those processes are for you to be able to be the enabler of that change. And so and I appreciate, you can only know those once you're actually inside the organization, right? And, there is different routes, obviously, to get into the organization, which we can talk about later, and how to actually become, a project manager or a program manager. But when you're actually in the organization, you're really heavily dependent on coordinating lots of different teams and lots of different people, as well as, technologies and processes. But the crucial part is people, right? people are driving the actions associated with delivering this change that is coming to the organization. Whether it's a new cyber technology or a new AI technology, whatever it is, right? So how you influence those people, right? We call it IWA, influence without authority. So there's a lot of teams you have to coordinate, and they don't necessarily report directly into you. So how do you work your charm? How do you work your previous experience? How do you work your charisma, your gravitas, your character to work alongside a lot of people that you don't directly report into you, but you have to get them to execute actions which will forward or help deliver your own project or program. And when I say your own, I'm talking on behalf of the business, or like the product owner or the control owner, whoever is sponsoring this change. And in my case, like sometimes it is a control or product owner. They will own like the internal NIST control of that cyber control. So whether it's vulnerability management, threat modeling, network segmentation, protective security, whatever the control is, that technology has been decided to come in to the organization to uplift that NIST control. And so how you manage that, across people, processes, and tech, I believe is the crucial role of the project manager. And I put so much emphasis on making sure you get that project manager absolutely spot on, because they have a lot of responsibility to help be the enabler of that change.
I mean, look, in terms of walking into programs of that scale, what's the mindset for you in the first 90 days? And you've kind of outlined to some degree where you start. How do you stabilize the inevitable chaos?
Jay, instantly, my mindset, and this is very similar to the public speaking stage as well, right? So, they say public speaking is one of the second biggest fear after death, right? So my instant reaction when sort of facing these complicated or sometimes very vague asks on, let's go and deploy this technology, or go and execute this proof of concept, or let's uplift this control a little bit, cyber control a little bit more. My instant reaction has always been, let's have it. Come on, let's do this. I'm always there, like first one to put my hand up, being like, yes, I'll be that guy. Like I'm very much a yes man, and unfortunately that has worked against me as well, because sometimes I've said yes to too many things, and then you end up crashing and burning out, right? But that's probably a separate talk. But usually, the instantly, Jay, to answer your question, is just putting my hand up and saying yes. And that's what's always sort of opened doors of opportunities. That's what's given me exposure to like the different types of projects that you can do within the cyberspace. So it's not just about implementing new technologies, but there's also demising legacy or old technologies. There's evergreening, upgrades, moonlighting, RFIs, and proof of concepts, like a whole host of different types of projects. And so that's given me a lot of exposure to that. But the key message is always been, it starts with your mindset. So I really like that question, Jay. And the mindset for me has always been just saying yes, and that's always opened doors. And that's not just like extensions of contracts, but it's to meet other people on different teams, to learn about new technologies, and then to learn about how what their processes are as well. So you get to move around different teams, learn different processes, and most importantly, connect with people and humans. That to me is crucial. Just by saying yes, the doors that it opens for you.
And to some degree, look, it may be there's a similar kind of answer here, but look, we know there's a million regulations coming thick and fast, and regional regulations can often clash or compete. How do you balance that global risk? What does that look like behind the scenes?
Behind the scenes, Jay, it can be very messy. It can be like when we have sort of many stakeholders that we have to sort of constantly provide status updates to, manage them, manage their expectations. You have lots of different senior, C-level, group level executives who perhaps want different things. So, some may have their priorities focused on regulatory and compliance projects. Others will have, sort of NIST control uplifts priorities, and also we have like internal risk registers that, based on the severity of those internal risks, will give life to different types of projects as well. So managing, and you'll have a different stakeholder who has a different priority across each one of these different towers when associated with cybersecurity. So usually, step one for me is get all these people in a room and have a very well structured meeting, where I've done the prep beforehand. So I figured out what, well, not figured out, but asked a lot of questions before the meeting, before the planning brainstorm, to know what the scope of the project is, to know what the priority also is for each one of the different stakeholders, and then have a sensible conversation with also a very, very colorful Microsoft PowerPoint slides as well, and crucially, for me, is tracking the actions. Like if you have a 30-minute call, 60-minute call, let's say with 10 people for half an hour, right? That's 300 minutes of that organization's time. So what are the actions that have come out from that 30-minute conversation, right? So that for me, having very well structured governance in place with the right people, and then tracking the actions that have come out of that meeting, that whole process just has to be very, very well regimented and structured. And it's those little things that give that structure and routine, Jay, to that very messy, competing and clashing priorities. That's what I find has given a lot of structure to the madness. Really, is just almost like if you are structured and organized and you know how to influence without authority, like that's what comes out in your project delivery and your project execution, I find.
And look, it's one thing to run projects, and another to obviously deliver across silos with egos and, of course, moving targets. And of course, as you've outlined just now, you've got a lot of experience. You've seen some mistakes as well as sort of what works and what breaks. So, could you share with us perhaps the biggest misconception that people have about large-scale project deliveries?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. I think it's probably what I had, which is thinking that the bigger the organization, the more structured, well-refined, and well-oiled machine it is. And when I stepped foot inside these organizations, I realized just it's the complete opposite. Like you touched on silos, like almost the leadership team of each team almost drives the culture and the structure and the regiment of that team. And the more teams you have, the different types of structures you may have of delivery. So some teams, yes, they might be well structured, well orientated, processes are in place, but other teams, they're all over the place and deliverables are not getting met. There's risks all over the place within delivery. And it's all dependent, in my experience, it's always top down, right? The culture comes from the top. So if the person at the top is not very well structured or organized, it will filter through into the team. But if the person at the top is regimented, is a change management professional, they know the difference between theory and execution, and not just tracking sort of fake metrics to please stakeholders, but actually executing and knowing which actions are actually delivering benefits to the organization. But that to me is make or break. So looking out, it was like like for me, the banking industry was this flashy beacon, which in sort of 2006, 2007 was paying really well. And then I thought, wow, the processes inside these organizations must be, really, really well oiled, well refined. But when I went into them, like that was the biggest eye opener. Was like, wow. But then luckily for me, like that's where, I sort of filled those gaps, because I think that, I've been described as I probably am quite structured and regimented. And again, that's what fitness modeling and, training sort of 12 times a week has provided, that regimented discipline. And so it's like, for me, it's like, well, I want the organization to be messy and unstructured, because then, that's where the role comes in for me, right? Like that's where I'm bringing my value, and that is my value proposition to that organization, right? And hopefully, that's why the job role is live, because that's the personality that they're looking to fill. So, I think, for me, it was that was the misconception. And I would just say, just have a think, to the audience that are listening, is just, what are your skill sets, what are you good at, and look for organizations that are bad at that. And then you can go in and hopefully, fill that gap, which is what will, land you your next role, hopefully with secure.
I appreciate you sharing there. And I know you touched up on it a little bit a few moments ago, but are there any other ways that individuals, leaders, people that are obviously aspiring to move in positions such as yours, is there any other ways that they can build real accountability with global teams?
Yeah, I think so, Warren. For me, it's always about starting, at the bottom, starting, ground level, and just putting in that hard graft. When the lights are off, it's Friday night and you're at the gym when all your mates are outside, clubbing and partying, but you're sort of chipping away and working hard. So I think if you're trying to be, program manager, portfolio manager, I don't know, a group level CISO, or a C-level executive, but I think you can't just jump into those roles, right? Because those roles, depending on the scale of the organization, can take 15, 20 years to master, how to be somebody of that sort of caliber. But you've got to take step one, which could be perhaps, in the change management world, would be like getting a PMO analyst role or a PMO lead role, which, requires, not as much experience as a project manager would need. But also it's like it gives you great visibility to what a cybersecurity portfolio would look like, the different types of cyber controls there are, as we mentioned, vulnerability management, threat modeling, network segmentation, network security. There's about 15 odd or so key controls within the cyber world. But being a PMO, which, for the audience, if they don't know, is the portfolio management office or program management office or project management office, which basically gives you a lot more of a holistic view of what that portfolio will be doing, but at the same time not necessarily being responsible for the delivery of that project or program, but giving you a very good view of how the engine works. So for me, anybody trying to be that that executive, or trying to climb to the top of the ranks, it's you've got to climb the first rung on that ladder, right? So find out what that is. Be the analyst, be the person who says yes to every single meeting. Even if it's just to get in there and take meeting minutes. Which is what I did. For a very, very long time, because I wouldn't give advice that I haven't personally executed myself. So I was that PMO analyst, right? Like I stepped into the world of change management. After my sort of back office, middle office, front office, I'd done that industry and I just shifted towards change management, but I didn't have change management experience. I ended up going into a PMO analyst role. And that's where I got a lot of exposure, to all the cybersecurity technologies and how those projects work and how they delivered. And it was just, the absolute sort of ground level, learning the foundations of change management. And, that's, it doesn't matter what the industry is, right? Like in any industry, start at the bottom and work your way up, because you will just become, a complete expert by the time you do get to the top, if that is the objective.
That's some great advice. Appreciate you sharing there. And I recently read a study, and it reported around about 70% of digital transformations have failed. Saw a comment in the comment section of that study, someone actually wrote, it's not because of the tech, it's because the people couldn't change. And certainly something that I felt resonates. So, from your perspective, what separates successful change initiatives from the ones that die in PowerPoint presentations?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. I think I've read that same statistic as well, and the slogan that usually follows, and I won't swear here, but it's PPPP. I think it's like something beep, poor planning leads to beep, and I've forgotten the next bit. Right, go on, Jay, fill it in. It looks like you know it.
Piss poor planning prevents piss poor performance.
That's it. That's exactly it. That's what gives us those kind of 70% figures, right? So for me, Warren, I think again it's down to another P, which is people. And we touched on it earlier that for me it's the project manager is one of the crucial people that is the enabler of that change, who a lot rests on their shoulders. And so that's one key individual, I think, that's responsible for enabling the change. But then, we don't want to confuse that person for the product or control owner who is responsible within the business for actually sponsoring the change, right? So there's two very different responsibilities within an organization, which is, the project sponsor and then the project enabler. So the project sponsor is obviously somebody who's been given the authority within the organization to either spend the money or make a decision on uplifting the cyber control and bring that and introduce that change. Now, the project sponsor will then go out and potentially hire the change management team or the project enabler, and that project enabler is the project manager. And so those two key individuals, I think, are what caused that 70% stat. So if those two are not aligned, or the project sponsor is not being the face of that change and just leaving it all over to the project manager, that's where I've seen projects fail. And projects go through the 4 stages of the project management life cycle: initiation, definition, execution, and closure. And they can fail at any point if that relationship between the project sponsor and the project manager gets disconnected. And so for me, it is having that clarity between the roles and responsibilities of those two key individuals: the project sponsor and the project enabler.
No, that's brilliant. And keeping with the theme of friction internally, for instance, when you have got other team members resisting, especially when it comes to change, or even worse, quietly ignoring that change, what's your method to bringing those individuals back on side, albeit the C-suite or even those sort of in your peer group, for instance?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. The short answer there is regimented governance, which opens up communication, right? So what I mean by regimented governance is, we're in a culture of sort of back-to-back meetings at the moment, right? So that regimented governance, and again, this is where the project manager comes in, is somebody who knows how to create structures that manage non-technical C-level or group-level executives, but also knows what kind of meetings are needed for very technical, subject matter experts, business analysts, technical SMEs, and knows how to deliver them. And knows how to deliver those kind of governance models as well. So what I mean by that, Warren, is, within the delivery team, you can deliver projects through different frameworks, like the Agile framework, the waterfall framework, or the hybrid approach. And within there, you'll have different sets of meetings. So if you're using Agile, for example, you may have to have a daily stand-up. You might have a fortnightly backlog planning meeting, a fortnightly sprint retrospective, a fortnightly sprint demo, a backlog refinement meeting. So there's lots of Agile ceremonies that are required within the sort of lower level delivery teams. But then the senior execs, non-technical C-level, group level execs, obviously they're not interested in that, right? So their key things is, how long is this thing going to take, and how much is it costing us? So they have a different agenda, but you as the change enabler or the project manager needs to be able to articulate all the risks at the delivery level and convert them using what I think is the best thing since sliced bread, Microsoft PowerPoint, into nice, colorful one pages that really articulate the risk and translate that risk back to like the business benefits, the ROI, or like the sort of the regulatory reasons why the project was perhaps kicked off, and how you're progressing against the business objectives of your organization, and mapping that delivery back to the strategic objectives of your organization, and the impact of those risks against those strategic objectives. And so those two different sets of governance models are what increases the communications and the updates of the project and the change that is being implemented. And at both stages, people want to know what's going on. And when they don't know what's going on, and what I mean by that is like a very thorough status report, it's that not knowing of progress and update, and hey, is this thing still happening? Like that's, and if people are like left out and they're not included, like that's where the communications break, and that's where relationships break down, and that's where tensions get increased. So the foundations to strong communication are very strong, structured, regimented governance meetings.
Yeah, communication is key. I'm going to just caveat back a little bit there and just reiterate, it isn't piss poor planning prevents piss poor performance. It's proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. Just for the audience out there who may be looking for a few hits and tips. So look, let's get into a bit more about your bodybuilding. You've touched on it earlier on, and the discipline behind a lot of your success, clearly. In fairness, we don't speak to too many individuals who moonlight as competitive bodybuilders. And obviously that discipline that you've brought into the boardroom has clearly been vital. Just talk a little bit more about how, what that's taught you about consistency, mental toughness, showing up, as you touched on earlier, even when no one's actually, watching.
Yeah, 100%, Jay. I mean, 99.99% of the time, nobody is watching, right? And that's where you have to develop that mindset. Like, can you still turn up? When no one's taking selfies, no one's taking pictures, and and what I mean by that stat is, and just a small correction, Jay. It's not bodybuilding; it's fitness modeling. So I don't want to confuse anybody. I've never touched.
My apologies. I'm trivializing it. I do apologize.
I've never touched steroids, and I don't plan
to. No, understood. For the avoidance of doubt, fitness modeling. I apologize.
And not that all bodybuilders take steroids, by the way. So just want to get all the disclaimers out there first. So what I mean by that, Jay, is like, it was about 8 years it took me of training by myself before I, decided to get on stage, because that was like just almost like the natural next step for me in my own sort of journey. Is that, do you know how much time you actually get on stage to sort of pose and show people like all the hard work that you've done?
I would imagine the ratios are extraordinary. Very, very low.
You get 90 seconds, and even that, it's not dedicated to you. Like you just like in a factory line almost. Like you come in, and then by the time you stand in front of the stage, the guy behind you is already coming out, and then you move across the stage, and then they take center. So you get about 90 seconds on stage, and that's not by yourself either. And so that's where you'll take all the photos and then go and post about them all. But it can take, like I said, it took me 8 years to get to that stage. And in those 8 years, there were no pictures, there were no cameras, there were nobody doing posts about anything. And it was just me sort of cooking and prepping my meals. Training twice a day. Like sometimes I wake up about 3:30 in the morning, go for a run, then go for my commute into Canary Wharf, and be logged on at my desk by 7:30. Then you eat your 7 meals throughout the day, up until about 6-7 p.m. Then you go back home. It took me about an hour and a half. And then about 7, I used to train from about 7:30 till about 9 p.m. And then from 9 till 10:30, I was in the kitchen cooking the meals for the next day. And, I did that I did it the first day when I, decided to get my personal trainer to help me with getting on stage. So I did it for day one, and I was just, absolutely exhausted. I was like, come the end of the day, I was like, I don't know if I can do another day of this. And then I did do another day of it. I was like, come on, you've done it for one day, just do it another day. And then at the end of day 2, I was just, twice as tired. And I was like, okay, I've done 2 days now. Come on, let's do the third day. And so then the third day turned into a week. And then after a week, it was like, well, you come this far. And, one of my sort of quotes is, you haven't come this far only to get this far. So then I ended up doing another week. And then the week turned into a month. And so it was just like, that sort of day by day, almost hour by hour, like those tiny, tiny little steps it was like, that's all I had to take was just that next step, like just take the next step. Don't worry about the next month or the next week. It's like, just take that step. And, I'll digress a little bit, but, very often when we're trying to get to the gym, right, the feeling, like you're sitting on the sofa and it's like, oh, you're comfortable. You're like, oh, do I really want to go to the gym? Like, you should, but the sofa is just so much more comfortable, right? But it's because we are, programmed to not spend calories, right? It's a process called homeostasis, whereby, we like to not move and not do anything. So for you to then, go against the body wanting to rest, that's why you get that feeling of not wanting to go to the gym, because by going to the gym, you're going to have to spend calories and your mind is telling you not to do that. And so my advice there is, don't think that you have to get to the gym. Just tell yourself, stand up and put your trainers on. And just think of that as the target. Don't think, oh, I've got to go and do so many reps and do so many sets. Just think to yourself, let me just get to the door and let me put my trainers on, and then just watch what happens after that. I challenge you and the audience that are listening to just do that.
It's the old adage, isn't it? You crawl into the gym, but you skip out. Yeah. Absolutely. The difference in how good you feel once you've done it is night and day. And look, let's talk a little bit. I mean, I think that definitely gives people some markers in people who may be struggling with direction or discipline outside work. How would you apply that enterprise level structure and planning to personal goals, as outside of what you've touched on already? How else would you say? Let's maybe give us an example of where you think that athletic sort of mindset helps you in a high stakes sort of pressure environment.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. I think, just straight away, think of it as like training legs. Something I've always taken the hard route, or, like the sort of the thing that nobody else wants to do, like the sheep that's sort of traveling against the crowd. Like, that's always just been sort of my mindset and who I am. And so I always end up taking like the hard route. And so when I say think about legs, it's like, because nobody likes to train legs, squats, quads,
leg day,
yeah. It's probably the hardest, I think, out of all the muscle groups that there are. And applying that, to the world of change management, where we have lots of meetings and back-to-back meetings, like taking meeting minutes and strong, very well-crafted actions that have come out from that meeting, like as mundane as it sounds, like that to me is almost like the foundational driver behind change, is the tracking of those actions, and then you being the person who's staying on top of that actions log, and following up with people saying, hey, have you done that? May I please have the latest status on that action? We met last week and you took away these 3 actions, and you said you were going to do them within the next 2 weeks. Can I please have a status on how those are going? And that's like, the foundations of delivering cybersecurity, AI, any technology into any organization, is doing those really mundane, hard tasks that nobody else wants to do. And legs are the foundation of the rest of your body. Like, you've seen, guys and girls that have just got massive arms, massive shoulders, massive chest, backs, and then, chicken legs. And it's just
I'm a bit like that myself, Gurps, to be fair.
yeah. You train the chest and arms, 6 weeks before the summer holiday, and you forget to squat and do the legs. And so that's what I've always seen is like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I love doing legs, but that they have to be done in order to have that complete holistic view of your organism, you as an organization, right? And then similarly in the enterprise world, those actions, somebody has to track those actions, right? So it needs to be, in my opinion, it has to be you, and it's the most boring task, most mundane, and sometimes the most hardest task to do as well, but it's the foundation of growth. Similarly, as legs are the foundation upon which your back, chest, and the arms grow.
We used to ask our guests when we first kicked the podcast off about metaphors and analogies. That's definitely one of the best I've heard. We don't ask the question anymore, but we should do. That's a cracker.
Well, thank you, Jay. It is like for me. It's just always about the foundations, right? Like whatever you're trying to grow, whatever if you're trying to even build like a property or a house, or you're trying to climb the ranks in the corporate world. Focus. What are the foundations? What are your foundations like? Have you got that foundational knowledge? Have you got that foundational experience? Because if you build on foundations that have got cracks in them, you know what's going to happen, right? Everything's going to come tumbling down. So you might see short-lived success, but if you just focus on, in my opinion, just focus on those foundations, and the deeper you can dig those and lay those foundations, the higher the enterprise that you build will go.
Some great advice. Appreciate you sharing there. And obviously everything you've been doing is what I best describe is high performance, but we understand that high performing individuals, sometimes it takes its toll on the mental well-being, for instance. So what does the audience or people in general need to understand about the tech and cybersecurity field, and about the toll that it takes on leadership, especially when it comes to mental well-being?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. I think there's been a lot of change since COVID. Like, I think, work culture, the digital workplace, the last sort of 3 years, certainly, I have seen that work and meetings and working from home, hybrid working, it's just become very monotonous, and, there's no more banter left in the workplace. Sometimes you go in and, there's different teams that you perhaps, don't necessarily liaise with, and your team's, probably not even located in the same city anymore. So I've found that sometimes, all your pings and all your messages, all your emails, like they're just purely, work related and action orientated. And, I think come towards the end of the week or end of the month, if that's all you've been doing, and, you've not sort of had some space or, some time to sort of relieve the pressure, I think that's where burnout can creep in. That's where anxiety can kick in, and stress levels are generally high for everyone anyway. So I think certainly we've got to be very careful about not having like a vent or a side hobby or a side like exercise, for example, which allows us to actually be better performers, at work and in the digital workplace. So that I've seen that certainly from my own personal experience. When I'm sort of speaking to my colleagues and teammates, it's sometimes there's just no banter. You don't know how what else is going on in their life, and if you do perhaps probe a little bit or ask a couple of questions, it might just be 2 or 3 messages via Teams or you know what I mean? So it's not really a detailed engagement or interaction. So that has for me, has changed quite a lot since hybrid working. Is the like the people connection that you used to have when it was everyone in the office.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And briefly, is there a point that you've ever reached where you've almost broke, for instance? And what other methods have you used to sort of pull yourself away from that and through it?
Yes, yeah, Warren. I think, I will share a personal story. Like, it happens all the time, usually I find it happens more like by Thursday or Friday where, I've just had enough of pings, and sometimes, you get an ask and you just like, it blows your mind because you're like, what is that information needed for, right? So, or you're on a call and somebody will just say something that you completely disagree with. Um, but you at the same time don't see the value in either correcting them, or I don't know, perhaps they're of a much higher rank, and so you perhaps don't want to correct them, or you let I think you touched on it earlier, like you let the ego, let it be, right? Because sometimes it's the ego that's usually sort of driving what's just been said or done. So, like, towards the end of the week, I do, if I've had just two, not really interacted much on a personal level with my colleagues, not had any banter, that's where I just sort of do sometimes crash and burn. Um, if it's a heavy, intensive training week as well, like burnout for me is very common. So these things do kick in more, and 100%. So, how do I lift myself out of them? Like, I think I did a post on this just a couple of days, is just sort of step away from the desk, just for a couple of minutes, and just do anything that just gets the heart rate up. So whether it's walking up and down the stairs, just going outside and getting a breath of fresh air. I've started practicing like mindfulness as well, just taking a couple of big deep breaths, for 3 minutes. It's not a lot, but it's just these little things, and if you can, perhaps schedule 25-minute meetings rather than 30 minutes, or 45 minutes rather than a full 60 minutes. So it's just these little things that, do help, but, I'm not going to lie, like they don't always work. And sometimes you just, you feel like throwing everything off the desk and, and just, switching everything off and going off to Spain or something like that.
No, certainly some great advice. Appreciate you sharing on that. And one thing we haven't spoke about yet is friends, family. A lot of us, that's a driver for us, and something that's really important for myself and Jay, and I know with a lot of our audience, is protecting the next generation. There are teachers, parents, and caregivers that listen to our podcast, and we try to help them develop positive digital hygiene habits for young children, for instance. And we're always looking for different ways to inspire and motivate them. So how can we equip the younger generation with the knowledge and, of course, the practical skill sets to stay safe online? Or, how can we, of course, inspire them to actually break into the industry?
Yes, Warren. I think so. A couple of things, like maybe why I'm sort of on this podcast as well is to help where I can with exactly that strategy you've recommended or suggested rather, because that's why I'm doing a lot of more public speaking side of things to spread the message of AI, cybersecurity, and change management, right? Like how the impact of all this new technology, what it's doing, to our family and friends, to organizations, and what are the benefits, what are the pros and cons. So, you and I have been speaking the best part of this year as well. So I'm happy to, get involved, either in the public speaking space somehow, or, with workshops or whatever is required. So I'm happy to share my experiences on different types of platforms. And then, the second part to it is and what I'm seeing, and I could be completely wrong. The next generation, they're very heavily, a digital generation, right? So everyone's into their screens and their phones and their social media. But for me, it's about, just hard work and, just grinding in the gym and, lifting those weights and taking action. So, whatever your chosen activity is, it doesn't have to be the gym, but it could be like learning an instrument. It could be learning a new language. It's, pick anything, but just, execute and take action, that's the crucial thing that sort of helps, I think, with mindset, and developing that mindset is just your ability to execute and carry out that action on a daily basis, every day, without fail, and just see what that will do to your determination and your character and your discipline, and you will be very, very pleasantly surprised. I think I've read it takes like 64 days to create a habit. So, do something every day for 64 days, and then, see where you were at day 0, and then see where you were at day 65, and see if you're still, the same person, right? I guarantee you, mentally, physically, spiritually, you will have learned so much and changed so much. So I would say, take action, pick something that you're good at, or something that's taking you out of the risks associated with, all the digital world brings to the younger generation, and focus on, the real physical world, and have an event or have something that takes you, pulls you away from there, because, having that sort of side outlet actually then makes you better in the digital world, because it gives you a chance to refresh, recharge, and just think like, hey, is what I'm doing right? Should I click that link that's just come through on email, right? Whereas, like, if you're just answering emails every day, all day, you don't necessarily even think twice before clicking that link, right? But if you've just stepped away, recharged, executed on, let's say, your hobby or your activity, you'll come back feeling refreshed and recharged, and then actually be like, actually, no, I'm not going to click that link, because I don't know who it's from. So it is these very, very little things, I think, that, as cliche as it sounds, make the big things happen.
I certainly appreciate you sharing. And we would like to ask some of our guests a bit of a curveball question. There's a few choices in terms of how you answer this question, Gurps. So you do obviously indulge us, but what's one common belief in cybersecurity that's perhaps holding the industry back, and why? Or do you have any unconventional viewpoints or challenge to the norm that you feel needs a bit more light and attention?
I think it's similar to the previous question, Warren. I think it's the misconception that everything is well structured and well regimented. And I think to know what skill you're bringing, whether it's on the people side, processes side, or tech side, that is you looking in the mirror first, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And then, giving that, identifying your value, and then giving that to the cyber world, and be like, hey, this is what I'm bringing to this organization, or this is what I'm bringing to this cybersecurity team. So it's like, knowing yourself and knowing what your value is where you can add that value to the organization. So, the misconception is that it's not sort of glamorous, and it's very clunky and very unstructured when you're deploying technologies into organizations.
That's brilliant. And very briefly, do you have any predictions for the next 5 years?
It's 2 letters, and it begins with A. AI. There's no avoiding it. It's a simple fact. It's not even the next 5 years, right? It's now. It's today. It's us even in the, talking in this podcast itself, and there are 2 types of people on this world, right? There's those that wait for change, and then there's those that make change happen. So decide which one you are, right? One is a very closed mindset, and one is a very open mindset that is always embracing change. So decide which one you are, because AI isn't something that's not coming. It's here. And so if you are the type of person that makes change happen, you can learn change management, you can learn how to deliver cybersecurity tools and projects and programs, and you can control and make that change happen. Whereas if you're somebody that just waits around, is very comfortable in what they're doing, and just waits for projects to be deployed, then I think that's the type of mindset that has a difficult time embracing that change. And so in the cyber world, AI is going to drive a lot of the enhancements and the cyber control uplift, but at the same time, it's going to empower a lot of the activists and obviously the hackers as well, because they are learning new technology and tools as well. Like, they have it at more, even more readily available than what some of the big organizations do have, right? So, when you look at an organization's internal processes, they take a lot longer to deliver change than what a hacker sitting in her or his bedroom have, right? They've got no processes to follow. They don't have to pre-test any of the viruses or hacks, and they just want to deploy them as quickly as possible and do as much damage as possible. So whilst AI is going to bring already has brought a lot of benefits, at the same time the risk profile is going to also be impacted heavily, combined with the geopolitical threat landscape as well. So those are the two key things, I think. The geopolitical threat landscape, as well as the implementation of AI or Gen AI, is already reshaping this world. So embrace the change.
Embrace the change, absolutely. And look, for you, in terms of your own situation, Gurps, would you be kind enough to share with our audience a bit more on enterprise change management and what your purpose and your mission, your vision, and going forward, what is what's the plans for you?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. So for me, as touched on it, just when you said about your audience and I guess maybe educating them or sharing with them more about my experiences is on the public speaking side of things. So I've always had public speaking as a hobby. The last sort of 15, 17 years, I've always been a part of Toastmasters International. I'm also part of the Professional Speaking Association in the UK. And so I've just always had public speaking as a hobby. And again, the reason for that is because it's very hard, it's very difficult. And that's just drawn me towards it, right? I think I mentioned earlier it's the second biggest fear after dying, right? So I was like, oh yeah, that sounds difficult. That would be for me. So I've always just had that in the background, and now I'm combining the sort of my passion for public speaking along with my passion for change management and deploying projects, and basically talking to audiences on podcasts like these, on keynote stages. Just to get that message across. And for me, it's a very personal journey, Jay, because sort of growing up, and we mentioned like some of my first roles. I never had like any mentors or like sort of people showing me the way. And my going back even further, like my mother unfortunately committed suicide when I was 5 years old. My dad was killed whilst on holiday when I was 21, got hit by a bus in India, and I had to fly over and cremate him during my final year exams at university. And then my stepmother died when I was like 29. So a lot of sort of traumatic experiences have shaped my life. And at the same time, devoided me of like any mentors or sort of people that I, in my life, I sort of looked up to. Like there was loads of idols and things like that on TV and bodybuilders that I aspired. But, it was that sort of guidance, somebody holding my hand, showing me, what the pitfalls are, like that I've always sort of had a shortage of, or felt I've had a shortage of. And so to sort of flip that and add value where I can, I'm pushing on the public speaking side to be like, hey, here's what I've learned in the last 15, 17 years, and if it can be of value to you, if it can be to value of your audiences now, like, then I'm happy to share that experience. So that experience comes in the form of change management and, all the processes that are associated with delivering technologies and delivering projects, either in the cyberspace, in the property and construction world, or in the fitness modeling world as well. So it's just about providing, getting up on stage, sharing my message with a view that I can maybe impact just one person in the audience, and then I've done my bit with that keynote speech or this podcast.
Now, thank you for sharing, Gurps. And For any of our listeners who want to stay connected beyond the podcast, obviously LinkedIn is of course where everyone can be found, but anywhere else they can reach you?
No, that's the main one, Jay. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, or make things as simple as possible and not any simpler. So yeah, LinkedIn, Gurps Khaira, and that's message me on LinkedIn, and I will get back to you.
Well, I'm sure Warren will agree with me when I say we've had a lot of guests on our podcast, Gurps, and you've definitely been one of the most inspirational. I think there's been some incredible content. I think you've given us amazing insight, and we're very grateful for you. For you to have taken the time to do that. I think there's been loads of really good stuff to hopefully excite and inspire our audience, and some really good stuff for people who may also be further down the road as well. So huge thank you for your time today, and I really enjoyed the episode.
No, Jay, I mean, you more than welcome, Jay, Warren, but I just want to say, the pleasure has been all mine, mate. Like you guys at, Cyber Connect and Secure, you're doing absolutely amazing things. And, we've known you both now for the best part of this year. And, what I've seen from the work you're doing, that's why I've agreed to do the podcast here, because I believe in your message. I believe in your strategy. And I believe, the value that you're adding to your audiences is phenomenal. And, I haven't seen many consultancies in your space, I dare say any, that are doing, the executing the operating model that you guys are. So, hats off to you, and, you're adding incredible value to your audiences. I really applaud you for that, which is, why I was happy to connect, and also happy to stay connected as well for future engagements. And, obviously I'll see you at a lot of the events as well. So, hopefully, touch wood, plenty more to come. And, keep doing what you're doing, because you two are absolutely smashing it.
Thanks, Gurps. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll catch up very soon in London.
Yeah, lots more events coming up in September, October. So yeah, lots more to hopefully, and some future collaborations with your good self, Gurps. We'd just like to say thank you to the community, all our listeners. I'm certain they'll have found a lot of value in today's episode. As always, if people want to continue the discussion for more sustained engagement, join the Secure Cyber Connect community, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions for tech and security professionals at no cost. Expansive community access, mutual mentoring, online networking, a range of exclusive interviews such as this, with panel discussions, live events and masterclasses, the very first which we did do at long last a couple of weeks ago. If you want to learn more and gain access, then join the community and our initiatives. Please visit secure-recruitment.com/cyber-connect/. Thank you very much, everybody.